What's up? It's your boy Carcino here, and this is the truth behind the TV show Three's Company. I know most of you younger people might not realize or recognize what this show is. You might say, my parents used to watch this show. I don't know what it is, but I think I remember it a little bit. Three's Company was a hit show. Definitely a great comedy for people my age coming up, and even our parents watched it. Very hilarious show. Now, this show, you probably like, what is that we're looking at right now? That is the British comedy show that it was based off of, called Man About the House. And that show was daring at a time. It came out in the early 70s with, see, it wasn't common for you to live with another woman and maybe two at a time if you were a single man. I know that's, believe me, that's nothing now. People wouldn't even rent to you if this was the case, being the theme of the show. This guy has to pretend he's a gay man in order to, to live with two single women. Now, that's based off what Three's Company is. And that show only lasted 3 years, Man About the House, but Three's Company found a home here in the United States, finding the right guy to play the right part. Now, the right guy to play the right part was John Ritter. You had to find the right character to play the lead. And John Ritter was this upcoming comedian, does a lot of physical comedy. And they were thinking of making this show when they was auditioning. He was the guy they said, he's perfect. Young guy, energetic, a lot of comedy. Rodney Dangerfield vouched for this guy. A lot of people vouched for him. John Ritter was the man. So the script is the same. They're in Santa Monica, California. They're all living in a platonical relationship where they're just friends, but the Ropers, mostly Stanley Roper, who runs the complex, him and his wife, they don't want a man living in an apartment with two women by himself. Now, first episode, they meet him at some party and they let him fall asleep in a bathtub, and then he needed a place to stay. He was the chef. He went to culinary school. He could cook. So they couldn't cook. So now you got somebody in the house that could cook. So they let him stay there, and that was the theme of the show. So the whole situation changes here on the show when Mr. Roper tells them they couldn't live there. Jack has to pretend he's a homosexual in order to be allowed to stay there. That's the only way Mr. Roper would believe that he's not sleeping around with the other two girls. Now, he always flirts with the other two girls and tries to lure them into a relationship, which kept the interest of everybody who was watching. Now, Mrs. Roper, she finds out by the second or third episode that Jack is straight. And Larry, the best friend, going to their famous club, the Regal Beagle. We and my buddy used that name for every club we went to. Man, we going to the Regal Beagle tonight. Going to the Regal Beagle, baby. Every club we went to, we named it the Regal Beagle. Yeah, where you going? Well, I went to the Regal Beagle. Now, seemed like this was a show that was smooth sailings, right? but it wasn't. This was a show that became one of the biggest accidents of all time. Biggest accidents. So, when Man About the House went off the air in like 76, and 77, in comes Three's Company. Three's Company they went right on along with the plan that they had in place for Man About the House. So when the producers got together and said, we're going to use about 3 sets, we'll use the Regal Beagle pub, we'll use the landlord's apartment, and the girl's apartment. So those was the 3 sets that they would shoot at. Now, going back into the the development of this episode, or the development of the show, Fred Silverman, who was in charge of all of the family, and I told you, all of the family's responsible for all these shows. A lot of people have done things for All in the Family and all these other different shows, and they had all of like 3, 4 different pilot shows, like trying to get within these slots. And Fred Silverman is like, this show that wasn't really take off in overseas, but here in America, this would work. So they had 2 writers to try to attempt to Americanize the Man About the House version. So they shot 3 episodes for Three's Company for television. And they said, okay, well, let's shoot 3 episodes and see how it goes. Now, one of the writers suggested, we got to have a ditzy blonde on the show. Now, somebody wanted a blonde with big boobs. And he was like, we got to get a ditzy blonde with big boobs. And she didn't test well. It worked, but didn't work. High male watchability. But then it kind of staled off with the women, which meant that the women were going to end up controlling the television and saying, I don't want to watch that, turn that off, and the male would have to do so. So after screen testing this, they realized that, okay, having a really busty blonde on there is not really the way we want to go for somebody that's going to be a reoccurring character on the show. We got to really rethink how we're going to do this show. So they got Larry Gilbert, who was the television writer who did MASH, who worked around having a busty blonde on the show. And it was his idea to bring the busty blonde on the show. But hey, they worked with a couple other people and said, you know what? We got to bring on Three's Company. Because What's Happening was popping at the time. And What's Happening was what was happening. And they were like, we need something to, to go in that time slot. Because What's Happening was a hit show that was going into its like 3rd season or something. And they're like, look, we need something out here now. And they got it all done, and they kept auditioning people for parts, and they had everybody pretty much done. And they had this girl named Susan Lanier who comes in to play Chrissy. So you got all of these characters here. You got Joyce DeWitt, who plays Janet Wood. She was already won her part. John Ritter's there, and they got Susan Lanier. So Susan Lanier is Chrissy Snow. And you're like, oh, okay. Susan Lanier. So she was the actress selected to play Chrissy. The second pilot was filmed by Susan. I don't know what is it with them casting a bunch of Susans and Suzannes. They had Suzanne Zenor in the casting, right? She was in the role. Then they went to the next person on the list, who was Susan Lanier. Susan Lanier gets the part. After Suzanne Lenore, they felt she was a little too old for the part. So they get Susan Lanier. You know her from The Hills Have Eyes, the original one. And they filmed the pilot and everything, the second pilot with her. Because, Lenore didn't work out. I mean, Zenor didn't work out. So now you got Lanier in here. So Susan Lanier's in there. Everything should be working out, as scheduled. And things just go left. It just didn't pop for them. Even though the cast felt like this is a good fit. Joyce DeWitt and Susan Lanier, they felt like it worked. John Ritter felt like it worked. Maybe this thing is going to work out. But it's not looking like this is something that's going to happen. So all the other people are keeping their eyes open for other projects because this is dragging its feet. Because now, all of a sudden, and it looks like they're going to hire Susan Lanier, they don't. It takes a weird turn, and Susan Lanier is basically told that, well, we have a situation here, and I just don't think it's going to work out. It's just not, I just don't think we got that character nailed down yet. And people couldn't believe it because she was like, she nailed down the secretary role. They was like, yeah, but she's just not, ditzy enough. She can't play ditzy. And that was the main problem. It just didn't come off as ditzy. So they had to find a blonde who basically was ditzy, had a little ditzy in her. And they brought in Suzanne Somers. Now, depending on who you ask, a lot of people are saying that there was a personal thing that happened here, the casting couch situation came into play, and in comes Suzanne Somers just out of the blue. This one person very adamantly fought to put her ahead of everybody else, and people hadn't seen her. She had one appearance on the Tonight Show, and that supposedly got her the job. And people were like, huh? And they went straight into production with her. And it was like, okay. Now, once it went up, the show was done and they did everything, and John Ritter's doing his usual Jack Ritter, tripping over his own 2 feet. The audience is loving it. But the producers, this is the test audience. The test audience is loving this. Who's not loving this? The producers. The producers in the back are scared. They think everybody's going to get turned off by John Ritter's just foolishness and clumsy portrayal of Jack, which was different from the version that they had in England. And Barry Van Dyke and this other guy named Michael Lembeck, they auditioned for the role. But Silverman wanted John Ritter to stay on the show. And the third pilot got accepted by ABC anyway, because of him. His comedy and all his silliness was what ABC was looking for. So they did a tryout at these other locations. And would you know, the show becomes a hit instantly. So now the show is a hit, and the addition was that they wanted to add to the show because the show is booming now. And they got a show that's going to run, and people are laughing and talking, and it became the show people were talking about. Like, oh my God, he's got to fool this guy, the landlord, and pretend that he's gay to stay there. It's hilarious. And he keeps flirting with this girl. I think he's going to sleep with that blonde. She's not that bright. So they're buying into it. They're buying into it hook, line, and sinker, and people can't turn away from the shows. Is he going to get caught by the landlord when the landlord finds out he's straight? Or what's going to happen with the show? And every episode, you're wondering if he's going to sleep with one of the girls or he's going to get caught by the landlord. What's going to happen with the show? So during the show, they started to make an addition. They brought in this real sexy lady, Lana, who was supposed to be crushing over Jack and was going to make it real difficult for Jack to stay single and try to pretend he's gay against her advances. So they had Anne Wedgeworth, and she was the bombshell woman at the time, and she would play that number, and the landlord would chase after her. Lana. So they brought Lana in because they were losing the the Ropers. See, the Ropers, Stanley and his wife, whatever, the Ropers, they went to get their own television show called just that, the Ropers. So when they went and did their show, they were replaced by another guy on the show called Mr. Furley. Mr. Furley, and that's who pursued Lana. So Lana was brought on the show to be the other castmate, that can fill in the slot where Mrs. Roper used to come in, but she's the one that's stalking Jack. And Mr. Furley has the same beliefs that his brother Bart, who co-owns the place, who really owns it, wouldn't allow a relationship where a straight man is with a straight woman. So they have the same scenario in place with Mr. Furley, the new landlord. And Lana is who he keeps running after, and she wants Jack. And that became a ongoing thing for about a season. And then, like they figured when they had the busty blonde in the show, complaints start showing up. See, this is back when people used to write in complaints all the time. Complaints started to fly. I don't like this woman on this show. She's not good for home television, and because husbands all wanted to see Lana. And that's not good. So they minimized her role on the show. Like they wouldn't have it as much. They toned Lana down with her advances of Jack, her flirtations and all of these things. They kind of died her down, and she didn't appreciate the fact that she was getting, pushed to the back. So, and, Wedgeworth, who was known, and, she had some reputation, so she went in there and started making demands. And when she did that, they let her go. Straight like that, they let her go. They said, okay, she wants to leave, we can let her go. And without any explanation, that happened. Now, having two successful, like almost 3 seasons in, the show is the highest it's ever been in its third season. The fourth season is when they introduce the Ropers, and the Ropers leave, and you got this whole new things come in, and now here comes the problems. Dun, dun, dun. So, due to all of these things that were going on and developing, there were changes that were going around and flying around with the show as far as the ratings, and everyone was like, wow, this is what we got to do, and this is everything, that's all these appearances, all these, and John Ritter's getting majority of the fame, of course, because he was like the star of the show. So it was John Ritter, John Ritter, John Ritter. But all three of them have different agents. So when all of these things were happening, when they went into the fifth season, all hell broke loose. Because now it was time to basically like reposition the contract. And her agent went for blood. And the problem is they had a deal in place that didn't allow all of these things to happen. Like their deal and contract, this is the first time this has ever happened, especially with somebody of this caliber. So they got 4 seasons in. They're averaging about 27.8 on the rating scale. They're like the number 2 show in the world in their time slot. And it's like, are you kidding? What do you mean? Like, what could be the problem? The problem was John Ritter getting all the credit, being Jack, and the person who felt that they made the show worth something and got a lot of fan mail and a lot of fan response was Suzanne Somers. Her agent got to thinking and was saying, "Hey, we matter here too, and we understand his worth and everybody else's worth, but hey, I'm telling you, things got to change here." Now they were getting each about 28,000 an episode. They were ranging about anywhere from 26 to about 28,000. I don't know the exact dollar, but around that much, all close to 30,000 per episode. And John Ritter was getting 150,000 per episode in his renegotiated contract. Plus, he got ownership and profits of the show. So when Suzanne Somers' agent found out what John Ritter was getting paid, it sent her into like, how is he getting paid? See, back then, Me Too would have came in real good for her. She'd have looked like a champion for Me Too. But back then, she had the Me Too fight back when you don't have the Me Too fight. They're like, are you serious? We being shook down by the blonde Chrissy? Oh, but Chrissy was not like what they thought. Suzanne Somers was not what they thought. So they went into renegotiations on the contract because they felt it was not fairly set. And so they had demands, or they were going to just basically violate the rest of the contract and just not go and hold up production and basically strike. So she wanted her contract to match John Ritter's salary. And whoa. She was like, I want that to happen. They said, no, this is not going to happen. And the network's like, we'll just replace her. There's no way we're going to pay that. So she said, okay, well, I'm going on strike. Wow. And it damaged the show. The popularity, it got public, and it was damaging to the show. They delayed like filming and everything for the program. John Ritter was livid, because now not only this taps into time he had with his son that he had allotted to do the recordings because he had to do things with his child as well. So this was, affecting a lot of people's private life and the nature of the show. They could have just pulled the plug on the show. And Joyce DeWitt, who's like, don't rock the boat. We got a good thing going here. We got a hit show. You're going to rock this boat. You're going to ruin it for me. She's like, I need that 30,000 an episode. So she's ruining it for her. And so she's mad. And they're talking about, we just might pull the plug on the show. So if you guys know her, you need to talk some sense into her. So they tried reaching out to, especially Joyce DeWitt. John Ritter refused. He was so livid. There was no way he was going to reach out to her. Now, she was still under contract. But due to all the backlash and all of this, they said, look, we got to reach a compromise. They said, look, we're gonna move on, but we'll let you appear in 1 minute tag scenes. Tag scenes is like when they show up, like they're on the phone or they're taking a trip somewhere. They're not even in the same area as the other characters. They're basically on the show, but they're not on the show. So on separate days, they would bring her in when they were not on the set. They'll bring her in on separate days of the show and do a regular taping. So she was never with any of the other cast members again. They had a off hiatus contract, is what they call it. Then, when the producer, Michael Ross, got into it, and that's when she just went there to being fired. So they did that, then she just got completely fired altogether. Now, a lot of people believe that Michael Ross and her had a little relationship, and then Michael Ross ended it, or she ended it, and then Michael Ross fired her. So that's word around the campfire. So all of this is going on around the show. Everybody's like, well, that show's dead. It's done. This is the beauty of television back then. The show suffered dramatically that season. They brought in an emergency girl, Cindy Snow, her cousin. And Cindy Snow, she came in and she did what she could. I mean, for that type of situation, for someone who's been established for 5 years, and you just come in as the cousin that they never seen before, who was just wild and off base and more like she was a veterinarian or something, just didn't work. So they went and brought in another person to go along with that. They brought in two women, and that was Terry. Terry came in season 6 after they brought in Cindy for 5, and she was there for like 5 and 6. And they said, yeah, we can't deal with Cindy. Let's just stick with Terry. So Terry was there as the show went 8 seasons long. I'm trying to figure out who was coming to my house unannounced. But anyhow, I digress. So after this was done and completed, They have never spoke for like 20 and 30 years to Suzanne Somers. They refuse to sleep with her. John Ritter has went public and said, I will never work with her again in my life. And Joyce DeWitt and her had met, spoke, and come to a understanding and talking over the years, and they made up. And through them making up, they were able to finally get a one-on-one conversation with her and John Ritter. And they had settled their differences about 2 weeks before he suddenly passed from some type of stomach illness. Now, the show continuously stayed at third or fourth place spot in the ratings until its final season, when it kind of just like fell off the mark completely. It was becoming more expensive just to keep the cast there, and they started doing spinoffs where John Ritter was going to go on his own show and start anew, where everyone else was going to go and do what they do. You know, it ran its course. And it was a great show. You know, we mostly saw reruns, but the show was great. But she was gonna appear on John Ritter's last show he had, Eight Simple Rules of Dating My Daughter, where he died on the set. She was gonna appear on that show, make an appearance, guest appearance on the show, as she went and had a successful TV show of her own, Suzanne Somers, years later. Joyce DeWitt, she kind of went back to just regular work. You know, after that, she kind of did a little television, little thing here, little thing there, but nothing really big. She mostly stayed with television. She was did a couple of movies, so I think when she had bit pieces. So I haven't really seen anything else other than that since Three's Company. She appeared on the Ropers once, and she just was doing episodes of things and sticking around. But other than that, that was it. You know, and that is completely all about Three's Company. Now, they did do Three's a Crowd. I don't know if we'll get that far. And that was the show where another spinoff they did, where Jack actually, on the last episode, moves in with his girlfriend that he was dating on the show. And he had to hide from Mr. Furley until the last episode. He tells Mr. Furley he's straight. And he's like, wait a minute, how you moving in with her? You're gay. He's like, oh, well, I got it from you. So, yeah, it was pretty interesting. I'm gonna miss the show though. I always will miss it. But it was time for it to come to its end. It's only so long you could run that angle. And they ran it for 8 years. So, congratulations to them. So I'm out. Thank you guys. Hopefully you guys subscribe to the page. I'm making a playlist for all the TV shows so you can get caught up with it. Don't worry about it. It's coming. And definitely hit the Cash App up and donate to the page. Carcino's the name. I'm out.